Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Solomon Rodesno. You're welcome to call me Salo. I'm director of the Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion. And today we are here because we want to acknowledge the victims from the Atlanta, Georgia, and Boulder, Colorado mass shootings. And so our program today starts with us giving a recap of what's happened in the last 2 weeks, a reading of names, moment of pause for each state, reflections, and then a sharing of the beautiful artwork that we have in our programs, which you could find on our Instagram, and also the context of where this comes. We also don't want this to remain as a prayer. We will have a call to action on how each and every one of you can engage with justice in Cleveland when it comes to stopping Asian American hate. And so right now I'd like to invite Dr. Tiffany Galvin Green to share with us a reflection following the shootings in Atlanta and in Boulder.
Good afternoon. I'm going to read something that's slightly modified from what's in the program, but still along the same lines. So as a JCU community, we join people around the nation in expressing our horror at the surge of recent gun violence that has resulted in inexplicable loss. 10 people were killed in a Boulder, Colorado supermarket shooting last Thursday on March 22nd. Just days earlier on March 16th, 8 people were killed at 3 spas in Atlanta, Georgia. News accounts searched for reasons to explain the motives of the shooters, from exclamation of anger issues or mental health concerns to discussions of racial discrimination and hatred. We find ourselves again at an unfortunate crossroads in society. Today we're gathering in remembrance of those who were killed and the friends, families, and communities that are grieving in the aftermath. For the shootings in Atlanta, it is particularly heart-wrenching that 6 women killed were of Asian descent, which has sparked many discussions of whether the continual racism and discrimination that the AAPI community faces and has tragically gone unattended in national discussions for too long. We're sad that it takes events like this and the amount of crimes in the U.S. that have surged in the past year to bring the pain and suffering that AAPI communities are facing to the forefront. We must take this time to reflect on the fact that motives for violence generally are not ever quite straightforward. The intersections of unattended mental health needs across communities are often racialized and stratified across class divisions. The intersections of racist, misogynistic, and sexualized violence are frequently hard to unravel, yet they are clearly represented in the heinous incident in Atlanta. Regardless of the motives, the tragedy and horror of any act of mass violence cannot be ignored. Neither can the fear and agony of a community that has experienced so many targeted racist incidents in recent months. Last Sunday, March 21st, marked the United Nations International Day to End Racial Discrimination. So we're all called to take some concrete action to defeat anti-AAPI racism and any racism in our community. In the end, it's hard to separate a person's motive for such violence from the ease with which the violence is committed. Just as in other horrific shootings or killings of others in marginalized racial, gender, religious, and other groups, the question we must ask ourselves is, why is it so easy for someone to take these particular lives? Why is it so easy to dismiss the humanity of these individuals? This is the reason why intersectionalities that cause irreparable harm due to layers of inequities draw attention to resources, and where there's been a lack of attention, resources, and ultimately solutions. This is what we must try to understand. Nothing is ever straightforward in the complicated web of dehumanization that accompanies racism, sexism, and gender-based violence. I'll end with this declaration. Violence that affects one affects us all. If one part of our community is hurting, questioning its safety and basic human dignity, then we all are. That's what true equity and inclusion is about and at its core. I'd like to close with a short poem that was written by the activist and social entrepreneur Amanda Wynn, founder of RISE, a civil rights organization. She wrote this in response to last Tuesday's shootings right after they happened. Faces that could be mine, where is the silver lining? Is it coming, that promised light, or is this a futile fight? But even if you can't see the end of the tunnel, in darkness carry on, one foot in front of the next, make your faith a phenomenon. A faith in what can be, a faith in what must be. What other options can there be? A faith in your grief, tomorrow is a belief. Let your tears affirm you are alive, carry you forward towards a new sunrise. Thank you.
At this point, we will do our litany of remembrance. And I'd like to call all of us to think of the following names of those violently killed in Atlanta on March 16th. Thao Yung Feng, age 44. Hyun Jung Grant, age 51. Elcias Hernandez Ortiz, age 30. Sucha Kim, age 69. Paul Andra Michaels, age 54. Soon Chung Park, age 74. Xiaoji Tang, age 49. Delania Ashley Young, age 33. Young A. Yu, age 63. Let us pause for a moment of silence as we hold the names of these individuals and their families in our hearts.
We call to mind the names of those violently killed in Boulder on March 22nd. Trelana Barkowiak, age 49. Suzanne Fountain, age 59. Terry Liker, age 51. Kevin Mahoney, age 61. Lynn Murray, age 62.
Ricky Olds, age 25. Nevin Stanisek, age 23. Denny Stong, age 20. Eric Talley, age 51. Jody Waters, age 65. Let us pause for a moment of silence as we hold the names of these individuals and their families in our hearts. I invite Joel up to share reflection on the wider context of violence experienced by Asian American communities.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. If you can't hear me very well, I'll be reading from the pamphlet, and I think thank you for the space to share this reflection. As we come together to honor the lives lost in recent weeks, particularly the lives of Asian Americans, let us remember and reflect on the long and difficult history of Asian Americans in the United States. The first Asian immigrants arriving on our shores as migrant workers in the 19th century suffered horrific conditions as miners, railroad builders, farmers, and factory workers. While they played a crucial role in building and developing our new nation, they were exploited as cheap labor and faced exclusion and discrimination. Let us remember how Asian immigrants were scapegoated during times of economic depression, encountering violence and waves of backlash throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Let us remember how Chinese Americans were excluded in an act literally called the Chinese Exclusion Act. We also remember the discriminatory Gentlemen's Agreement, the Tidings-McDuffie Act, the Immigration Act of 1924, and other forms of legislation that fostered a fear of foreigners, aiming to exclude Asian Americans from citizenship and full participation in our society. Let us remember how Filipino Americans were exploited for their labor on sugarcane fields. Chinese Americans were lynched in Los Angeles. Asian Americans were forced to attend segregated schools. Japanese Americans were sent to internment camps. Korean and Japanese Americans were ineligible for naturalized citizenship until 1952. Anti-miscegenation laws barred interracial marriages between Asians and white folks, and the list goes on. As we recount this complex legacy, let us also recognize the damaging effects of the model minority myth. The myth that if you work hard, keep your head down, smile, and stay quiet, then you'll be one of the good foreigners, a model minority. Fast forward to 2021, to today, anti-Asian hate crimes have increased nearly by 150% just in this last year. 3,800 anti-Asian racist incidents were reported in the last year alone. And this is not okay. The events in Atlanta were not random. They were the direct outgrowth of all these things, and whether we like it or not, we all have a role to play in this work for peace and justice. So together, let us work and pray. Let us work and pray for an end to hate and racism. Let us work to end language that treats Asian Americans as the perpetual foreigner or other. Let us work and pray for greater understanding and awareness of the rich and beautiful diversity of the Asian American experience. Today, let us work and pray for peace and justice. Amen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Asian Americans have spent the last few weeks grieving. This process looks different for everyone. Some are angry, some are scared, some are numb. Some create. This image seen on your program up here in the frame was created by my cousin Jordane Denorog, and I'm humbled to read her reflection on her piece. What happened in Atlanta is something that the AAPI community will forever grieve over. The recent spike in violence against the Asian community is not a new occurrence. I have to recognize and be upfront about the privilege that I have dealt with in my life due to the false model minority narrative that America has placed upon the Asian community for many, many years. But this narrative is a myth, and it is absolutely does not diminish the severity of the events that have recently occurred, nor does it negate the fact that Asians have been victims to malicious acts of racism and violence for years. The fear and anxiety that has been instilled in me will never take away the pride I feel as a Filipino American woman. It has been hard to grieve the loss of the lives of these women, but I have spent my recent days turning my grief and frustration into something tangible with my artwork. Katarungan para sa lahat in Tagalog translates in English to justice for all. I chose this phrase to emphasize the importance that no one in this country is free from violence and discrimination until all of us are free. We, along with the other communities of color, have been victims of the white supremacist values that this country holds. No community deserves to feel threatened and unsafe on a daily basis. I ask all of you today to keep the lives that we've lost throughout the years due to racism and bigotry in your hearts, and reflect on what you can do personally in your daily lives to help our communities feel safe like we deserve.
At this time, we are going to invite just a few people to light a stick of incense in remembrance of the victims, to help guide the victims in their journey to the afterlife. Once it's lit, please place it together in the container of sand over here. And we will invite everybody to accept a flower. So there's some practical pieces here. We were hoping to have this outside, but for everybody to light a stick of incense would create a lot of smoke. So can I have 3 volunteers to help us out with this, to come forward? So what we'd like to do is, I would like to explain the process before we begin, but I'll have our 3 volunteers light the incense, place it into the sand, and then once that is set, I would like to just have a moment of shared silence. And then you can come up to Salo or Kathleen, and we have yellow flowers. And the yellow flower is a symbol of both our grief, but then also our remembrance and a sign of hope. And we would hope that you could take this flower into your weekend and take some of the things that you learned here to remember as a part of our vigil here. So let's just take a moment and a moment of silence, and once it's lit, I'll invite people to accept the flower. Asian American and Pacific Islander families span a vast geographical, ethnic, and religious area. They may follow Buddhist, Hindu, Taoist, Muslim, Christian, or other religious practices. It's common for API families to plan a solemn and beautiful event as a display of their respect for their lost loved ones. And today we use yellow flowers to symbolize lamentation and grief while also burning incense to help the victims on their journey to the afterlife. When you're ready, you may approach and grab a flower. So I'd like to invite CSDI or a representative from CSDI to close this out.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. And know that this is not just a vigil, but a call to action. In your programs, you'll notice a QRC code. If you use your phones, that will take you to the march happening this Sunday in Asiatown, where you can join hundreds, perhaps thousands of folks who will join to express our support and our support and solidarity. And so please consider attending however way you feel most comfortable. CSDI, Campus Ministry, the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and the Office of Mission and Identity recognize the increased incidence of anti-Asian hate crimes and stands in solidarity with all those impacted by the most recent acts of violence in Atlanta and also Boulder, Colorado. We are here to support Asian and Asian American communities and encourage everyone to find ways to stand against Asian hate and oppression happening domestically and abroad. Above the QRC code, you will find the GoFundMe.com/AAPI. You'll be able to find more ways to donate with your dollars and also with your time. Thank you all so much, and I invite you all to take a moment to appreciate the artwork print, and you also will have a art print yourself. So thank you all so much, and stay safe, and we'll see you Sunday at the march.